Ben, did you had doubts when Joseph Newgarden got outside a paddle ward and tried to make that move?
If it was any other driver, I would have maybe had those doubts. But Josef Newgarden won this race last year, very similar last lap pass. Obviously, different circumstances coming off of the red flag and everything. And we'll get into that here in just a moment. But no, I mean, I as soon as I saw him duck to the outside, I had a feeling that he had a run. He was going to not lift going into turn 3. You can't lift it to the last lap of the 500, and he made the pass. And one of the most thrilling final laps I can remember in Indy 500 history. I think our friend Matthew Owens said it was the 4th time that we've had a last lap pass for the 500, and Newgarden now has 2 of those in back-to-back years. So just incredible finish. You do feel for Pato O'Ward, and I know we'll get into him a little bit later here as well, but just an incredible move by Josef Newgarden. The timing of it was absolutely perfect, and he's a 2-time Indianapolis 500 champion. And like I said in our chat yesterday, I believe now, some people might make a case for Michael Andretti. Michael Andretti never won this race, though. Some people might make a case for any of the answers, Al Sr., Al Jr., Bobby, take your pick. They were all great. But I think Josef Newgarden has a very strong case as the best American IndyCar driver we've seen since A.J. Foyt. He has been absolutely sensational at Indy the last 2 years. And like I said, going into last year's 500, it reminded me of Lionel Messi just winning the World Cup a few months before that. This was like the one major trophy in his sport that he hadn't won yet, but it was the biggest trophy of all, the Indianapolis 500. And now he's gone back to back. There's absolutely nothing left on his resume to check off. Everything from here is just gravy. And I can tell you he's going to get a lot of that over the next several years because this guy's not slowing down in the slightest. He won his 30th race yesterday. I have a feeling he's going to get to 40 easily, perhaps even 50. We'll see how high he can climb. But Team Penske, Josef Newgarden, congratulations on a great win. Absolutely sensational move to get the job done on the last lap yesterday.
If Josef Newgarden keeps this up, it would not surprise me if he eventually joins the 4 times winners club at some point. I could definitely see him getting another Indy 500, maybe another 2, maybe he even gets 5, because Josef Newgarden's still quite young and has many years ahead of him, many races to win. So it would not surprise me at all to see Josef Newgarden continue to win Indy 500. He could even win three in a row next year. It would be absolutely amazing if Josef Newgarden could achieve that feat. And it's crazy entering last year's Indy 500. Everyone was asking, when is Josef Newgarden finally going to win this race? Because he's basically done everything there is to do in IndyCar, but win the biggest races all. He checked it off. Now he's won it twice, and that move on the outside that was very, very impressive. And I didn't know if it was going to work, but it seemed like those Team Penske cars were in another league in this race all month of May. He made it work. It was very bold. Like you said, Ben, his last lap of the Indy 500, you don't lift at all. It was crazy seeing all these drivers making moves on the outside at Indy. You don't usually see drivers, willing to take those big risks. But we saw, it wasn't just Newgarden. We saw drivers all throughout the field racing like it was the last lap all throughout the race. It was just a very intense, wild Indy 500, and that was definitely a really, really great finish. One of my favorite finishes of the Indy 500. Was just a really, really great race, and that finish was absolutely epic. And I'll tell you, I've been on YouTube watching this finish over and over multiple times in the last several hours.
And Kobe, just to follow up on that, I think a $440,000 pass on the last lap, right? Because there was that Borg Warner bonus that had been accumulating ever since Elio went back-to-back in 2002. Nobody had done it since then. So a massive payday for Josef Newgarden. But again, like I said, that's all gravy. There's no, they said it yesterday on the broadcast. Pato O'Ward's got the second biggest check with second most points, but that's no consolation to him at this point. All he's thinking about is what could I have done to keep Josef Newgarden behind me on the last lap. And I'll just say what Al Unser Jr. said all those years ago. You just don't know what Indy means. It's absolutely incredible what Newgarden's accomplished here.
Yeah, that makes me wonder, what is Borg Warner going to do next year? How much money are they going to offer Josef Newgarden for 3 in a row?
It's a good question.
It's going to be really interesting to see Newgarden, that move. We had seen it earlier in the race. I just thought he got this. He just had the car to beat the experience level over Pato O'Ward. No doubt. I thought it was, even if he couldn't not get it, I thought he would get it out of turn 4 and make it a drag race. What an amazing race. Behind the mic, the runs for all-time classic 500 is unbelievable. Every single one in the last decade has come down to the last 2 or 5 laps. I know we were just mentioning 4 last lap passes, and they all are fairly recent. Of course, Dan Weldon getting the win when J.R. Hildebrand crashed. Sam Hornish getting around Marco Andretti on the last lap. And now Josef Newgarden the last 2 years. 108 runnings of this race. And all of those within the last, 20 so years. That's just amazing. Of course, last year, that last lap pass was very controversial. Leave pit road, come take the green and white flag, finish the race. Ben, does this win by Josef Newgarden silence the doubters and skeptics about how he won last year?
Well, unfortunately, I did see some of the conspiracy theorists because, of course, Penske owns the track and they had the penalty at St. Pete earlier this year. So, I mean, if you guys want to run wild with that, keep that off my timeline here, keep that off my feed. I think Penske got penalized very harshly for that, and they made it very clear that those issues are no longer a problem with their cars and everything. So unless more comes out that we don't know about, and they're doing some shenanigans again, then I can eat my words there. But I don't want to talk about that today. I want to talk about the great job that Josef Newgarden did. And again, I won't reveal who it was, but I did have a like-minded race fan in a group chat I'm in say he's legit in my eyes now because he felt very similarly to the way I felt last year about how the race went down. And I want to be unequivocally clear. I have my problems with how last year's finish played out and how the red flag was thrown there at the end. But none of that was on Josef Newgarden. It was a situation where the winner of the race was not in doubt. We can talk about how the last couple of laps were officiated, whether or not they should have thrown the red, what happened on that second to last restart there. There was no doubt who won last year's race. Josef Newgarden objectively made the pass and crossed the finish line first. It was not a situation like we had in 2002 where Paul Tracy will still tell you to this day that he feels like he won that race. We all know Josef Newgarden won last year. So, yeah, there were some doubters or skeptics that thought maybe he got a little bit of assistance with the red flag there at the end last year. But, again, if there were any doubters left, I hope that they've been silenced by this because there was absolutely nothing to doubt here yesterday with what we saw. Josef Newgarden, again, like we just talked about, it was the absolutely perfect move, perfectly timed, perfectly executed, and he got him back-to-back wins in the Indianapolis 500. I think that should be the story, not the controversy that we had at the start of the year, not the controversy with how he won it last year with the red flag. We should be talking about him as a back-to-back Indy 500 champion. I hope that's where the conversation goes from here.
Yeah, Josef Newgarden won this race fair and square, no doubt. What we saw in this race was his talent on full display, especially on the final lap. I totally agree with you, Ben. I believe that this should be the main storyline instead of all the controversy that's happened. And I think it's safe to say, based on the crowd reaction, Josef Newgarden's reputation, which obviously taking a hit after St. Pete, has definitely been restored, and maybe the drivers will start talking to him again. I remember after the scandal came out, then a lot of the drivers, they kind of distanced themselves from him, and Josef, he really took a lot of heat for his team, and now it really seems like that reputation starting to be restored, and maybe he can really put this all behind him because there was no push to pass in this race on the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Oval, so you can't say that was it. But I think Team Penske just executed this entire month perfectly, and despite losing some key members of their team, it seemed like they had the next man up mentality, and they were able to put a lot of already good people in those new roles, and they excelled. I know Josef Newgarden's pit on time and stand. You had the guy who leads the Porsche Penske Motorsport sports car program. And this is something out of his element, because he's used to dealing with sports cars, not Indy cars. So I thought he did a really great job, filling in for Tim Cindric up there and others on Joseph's team. So I really believe that everything we saw from Josef Newgarden in the month of May will silence any doubters. I think he won this race fair and square, and I think his talent should be admired because it was such a spectacular drive by him.
We'll go across, Ben, starting with you. Do you think that's one of the all-time classics up there with 1992 and the other phenomenal years that we've seen great finishes?
I mean, the only thing that could have made it better is if Newgarden had made that pass coming to the line on the front stretch than going into turn 3 on the back. But I mean, that's just nitpicking at this point. I mean, it was a fantastic race, and I am so glad. I was just hoping and praying the last 10 laps. I was like, I am okay with any of these top 5 or top 6 guys winning the race. Let's just please go green. Let's not have any of the controversy that we had last year with the late caution that forces a red flag and a late restart and how fans are going to be divided on that. Let's just please go green. And they did. And I'm glad they did, because I think that was in doubt with how the first half of this race went. I mean, the guys were really on edge and really aggressive early, but not just the finish, I think, but the entire race. Thank goodness we got it in. Thank goodness the weather held off with that second storm cell coming in. It's unfortunate what happened at Charlotte, and like Chrome Diesel mentioned, we'll get into that in just a moment. But I mean, yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. I think the best possible outcome, best possible scenario, given what we were dealt with in the morning with the weather.
I put this up there with 2011 when Dan Weldon. That was such a surprise, shock moment. 1992, Allison Jr. getting that win over Scott Goodyear. I know a lot of folks were rooting for Scott as he was closing in, but it left you on the edge of your seat. This is, I think, up there with those two as some of the best ones.
Yeah, for sure. I also put it up there as, one of the all-time classes. During the month of May, I usually go on YouTube and, watch some of the old Indy 500s that I really like. And I'm definitely going to put this one on my list. I thought the racing was, like I say, very, 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 very intense, wild, and kind of crazy at times. Drivers kept racing like, any lap could be the last lap. And I guess that's understandable since, we had a storm system that was supposed to arrive to the track. And thankfully, it didn't show up at all before the end of the race. But a lot of drivers, thought, we could have been racing to halfway, or after halfway could end at any lap. So they wanted to put themselves in the position. I think that also contributed to the intensity that we saw. And it was just a really, really good race. I definitely have to tip my hat to IndyCar, for working very hard to put on an excellent show, because we really didn't think the show would happen at all. And Matthew Owens said that IndyCar needs to be commended for their work yesterday too. The track was dried ultra quickly. Great work with the fans, getting them in and out, and then got all 500 miles in. Great work. Totally agree with you, Matthew. Really, really happy that IndyCar was able to, basically keep their whole pre-race program intact, and get the show on the road. And you say, thank goodness we're not all watching the 500 now in USA. Yeah, if 500 been ran out, they would have been moved to USA Network, which is, not necessarily the best thing for, arguably the most important race in the world.